Hey, it's Jim here, coming from the Moose Basin shop at the Bed and Breakfast here in Kapuskasing, and I'm just making this video here because I have received lots of interest from people outside of Canada and outside of Ontario wanting to come up here to do some hunting, and I'm getting lots of questions about the legalities behind coming, particularly from the States, to come up to Kapuskasing and do some hunting. So I'm just making this video for those out there who are thinking about coming up to Canada, particularly from the States, to do some hunting up here, take advantage of the bounty of resources we have up here in Northern Ontario. And I'm just making this video to make sure that anyone interested in doing that is going to have as much information as possible to make their trip as legal as possible and make it go as smoothly as possible so that you guys can actually come up here and enjoy a good time without getting harassed or needlessly scrutinized at any of the border crossings, either coming in or coming out. So the first thing that Americans should be aware of if they're coming up here to hunt is that we have different classifications of guns up here. We have restricted, non-restricted, and prohibited. You cannot bring a prohibited weapon into Canada for any reason whatsoever. Non-restricted or restricted, there's some uses for it outside of hunting, but if you're coming here to hunt, the only kind of firearm you can bring up for the purposes of hunting is the classification of a non-restricted firearm. So if you're doing hunting up in Canada, the only thing you can bring is a non-restricted firearm. And to be allowed to do that, you have to have all the information on the gun ready, and you have to fill out a non-resident firearm declaration. And you can get that through the RCMP website. And just going to switch it over here. And this is the form here that you get. You can get that through website rcmp.ca. It's a valuable resource there, and it's also valuable for transporting other things, but for this video we're just dealing with the non-restricted firearms. The RCMP and the Government of Canada has lists on their website about what guns are restricted, non-restricted, and prohibited, so be sure that if you're coming up, you check to make sure that the firearms you are bringing into the country are allowed to be in the country. And again, we're dealing with non-restricted firearms. And when you get this filled out, it's going to they ask that you fill out the form to save time before you get to the border, just to save time, but it has to be signed in front of border security. It has to be signed in front of an agent. So do not sign off on anything, but you can fill out the info to save time at the border. Now, this is going to cost you $25. And that $25 gives you a 60-day hunting license. You can, once you have that form, you're legal to take your gun into Canada, and you are legal to hunt for any species that does not involve you having a regulated trap line or having to buy tags for it. So an example of what you can hunt with just that piece of paper, grouse. You can hunt grouse with that, and which is very popular up here, and the grouse population is very bountiful up in Kapuskasing. But if you want to hunt bear, for example, Once you get into Canada, you would have to visit the local MNR office to acquire a bear tag for the area. And then another example for moose, if you're coming up here, we have a lottery system to get moose tags up here. And if you are a foreigner coming up to hunt, you need to get a moose tag from a licensed outfitter up here. You can't just come up with a firearm and expect to shoot a moose up here. That's poaching and highly discouraged. So if you're coming up for moose, you gotta basically set it up with an outfitter to have the tags. But as I said, if you're just coming up for basic hunting, just going for grouse, all you need to get safely across the border is a non-resident firearm declaration. And again, that comes with a 60-day hunting license, but you can also apply for a 5-year PAL. That will involve taking a safety course. But if you're coming to Canada many times or once a year or many times throughout the year, that would probably be the way I would recommend going. But if it's just a one-time trip, the 60-day license with the $25 charge will cover. Now, in order to come to Canada and hunt, the other things you're going to need, especially if it's just for grouse, is you got to be 16 years of age or older. And you will need to purchase an outdoors card when you get into Canada. That can be purchased off the Government of Ontario website and can be done online. You can, once you get it paid for, they send you a receipt. I know if you're up in the Kapuskasing area, as long as you have proof that you purchased it and they can contact the information, you're good to go. So you can hold off until you get to Canada to apply for it and to get it, because the receipt will normally be counted by any CO as proof that you have it. But if you want to be very safe, then I would go ahead and purchase your license before you come up into the States. That just saves any chance of any problems happening there. And obviously, as I mentioned before, if you're going for something that involves a tag of some sort, you will have to go through the right process, whether it's visiting the MNR office or going to an outfitter to get the necessary tags you need. And as always, it's always a good idea to phone the local MNR or get in touch with the RCMP in some way to figure out exactly what is legal for you to hunt and what firearms are legal for you to bring in, because in Canada we have regulations in terms of firearms that change more frequently than I suspect most countries go through. So when it's an ever-changing thing, you always want to touch base, because the websites don't always get updated perfectly. It's always a good idea to call ahead if you have any questions whatsoever about the firearms you're bringing in. And I'll get back to mention that 60-day license. Those 60-day licenses are only valid for the person signing and only valid for the firearms that that person listed. So if you're coming up in a group of 3 people, you're going to need to do a non-resident firearm declaration for each member of your party, and they will have to include every gun and piece of ammo that they have on it. And to the best of my knowledge, you cannot take up any ammo that does not correspond with the firearms that you have in possession. So make sure that when you're crossing to the border, you have everything filled out on that form and everything matches up and lines up. Otherwise, there's a very real chance either you or some of your firearms will not make it across the border. Now, I get all this information that I just shared with you, I got off of either the Ontario website, the federal website for Canadian Border Security, or the RCMP website. To get to the Ontario website, it's just ontario.ca. For the federal website, dealing with border security and import and export of firearms, you can go to cbsa-asfc.gc.ca. I will include these websites in the description of the video for you. And to get information from the RCMP, and that is simply just go to rcmp.ca. That is one of the better sites to determine if your gun is restricted, non-restricted, or prohibited. They have a pretty good outline of that on their website. And so that should be, if you follow that process, that should get you into Canada safely with your guns. Now, the next thing, now that you've made it into Canada safely, you've got all your regulations and all that lined up, and you're in Canada legally, one thing I'm going to add is that you need to be familiar with your zones and where you are hunting. For example, if you're coming up to Canada and you want to try and hunt in one of our national parks or provincial parks, that is a no-go. Most federal land, especially the provincial parks, have hunting restrictions on them where you cannot hunt in there. Some nature reserves and that have different rules depending on where you are, so always make sure you're checking your zone, your hunting zones, and even fishing zones if you're just coming up to fish, because the regulations change zone to zone. And why that is important in Kapuskasing in particular is if you look at the wildlife management zone, Kapuskasing is right here. Anything north of the highway is zone 24. But south of the highway, you're into two other zones. To the west of the river, you're in zone 23, and to the east of the river, you're in zone 30. Not all the regulations in those zones are the same. There are slight variations, particularly when it comes to grouse hunting, that differ between all those three zones. So you really have to make yourself aware of where you are going and what you're going to be hunting for. And M&R can help you with that, but another group of people that can help you with that are the local guides and local outfitters in the area that you're visiting. They have a good handle on where the boundary lines are and where you can do it legally. And also, as you can see with Zone 24 here, some of our wildlife management units are pretty big. So your guides and outfitters can also give you a good idea of where the game you're going for is and where the best spots to get your game is. And especially for the things you don't need a tag for, or don't need an outfitter for, like the moose hunt. Like if you're coming up here for grouse hunting, always a good idea to talk to one of the guides or outfitters, and they can point you to some of the more productive trails and productive hunting grounds for grouse at that particular moment in time. And also, this map here comes from the ontario.ca website. Not only does it have the maps of the different hunting and fishing zones on there, but you can also use that website to find out about regulations as they pertain zone to zone. It's a very, very good piece of good resource for looking at the regulations and that and getting into that. So when you're coming to Canada, in summary, you will need the non-resident firearm declaration. That costs $25. You need one of them for every member of your hunting party that is going to be using a gun and bringing up. Everything has to be all lined up. You need to get an outdoors card. And if you're going for things that involve tags, you need to be able to get legal access to a tag, either through the M&R or through an outfitter that deals with tags. And as always, when in doubt, check with M&R, check with the RCMP to make sure that the T's are crossed and I's are dotted and that everything is in place. And if you follow that procedure and go through all these steps, then you are going to make it into Canada safely, securely, worry-free, and you will have a very good opportunity for having an amazing hunting trip up here in Ontario. I encourage you to come up and explore Zone 24, 23, 30, explore the Kapuskasing area. We got lots of grouse, lots of small game, lots of bear, lots of adventures for you to go on. And if you're an American looking up here to go for moose, I am not one of those outfitters that provides the moose tags, but if you're interested in that, we have outfitters up here in the Kapuskasing area that do, and we have no problem getting you in touch with them to be able to give you a good hunting experience. Let us know. And if you have any questions, feel free to message us, and we will either be getting you the answer, or we will find the people that have the right answers and find the right people for you to contact to get the answers you're looking for. But we're most likely going to know it. That's why we're doing these videos, to pass on the information that we know to you, to make sure that your stay up in Canada, hopefully Kapuskasing area, is going to be as productive and memorable as you want. But you're spending good money coming up here. We want things to go as smoothly as possible, and we want you to absolutely get your money's worth and go back to the States with great memories of a incredible Canadian hunting vacation. So with that in mind, please accept our invite to come up to northeastern Ontario in the Kapuskasing area to enjoy some fishing, some hunting, and enjoy some of the best scenery that Ontario has to offer up here, and just enjoy the bounty of nature up here in Kapuskasing. Remember, if you want to book with us, to check us out at www.moosebasinvacations.com. If you're coming up to explore nature, we have all the boats, all the equipment you need, and we have all the expertise to help you use that and get out and enjoy nature however you see fit. There's a lot of it to enjoy up here, and you are all invited to come and enjoy it with us. Have a good day. And we hope to see you out in the bush and out on the hard water and on the water up in Kapuskasing in 2026. Until then, tight lines, folks.